Good morning, Chairman.
Welcome, good morning, and welcome to this formal meeting of the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee. I am Councillor Ian Carrington, and I am the chairman for this committee. Councillor Martin Griggs, vice chairman, is also present. Some housekeeping. Can I first remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and with this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the press and the public watching us live. As the meeting is being streamed in the usual way, I would like to remind you all that your comments will remain accessible online and can be reported by the media. I'd like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned for this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors, that's at that end of the room, and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park until further instructions are issued. I should also say, for the benefit of members and indeed for anybody listening to the live stream, there is not a small child drumming in the background. We have the builders in, and there is a certain amount of hammering going on, which may or may not be picked up by the microphones. Can I remind everybody to ensure that their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of the meeting, and may I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. Request to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. When invited to speak, you should press the button on your microphone unit to make it live, then press again when you finish your contribution, and we will now move on to the formal agenda. So, may we start please with apologies for absence and replacement members. Jess.
Thank you, Chairman. So we've received apologies from Councillor Spratt, and Councillor Noisia will be replacing him this morning.
Thank you very much indeed. We send best wishes to Councillor Spratt and welcome Noy. Next, item 2, declarations of members' interests. Does any member have an interest to declare? Seeing none, I would just remind members that if an interest does become evident to you as we progress through the meeting, just indicate at the time and declare it then. So moving to the third item on the agenda, minutes of the meeting of the committee on Tuesday, the 28th of February 2023. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record, and those minutes you will find on pages 5 to 19 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer, please? Thank you very much. Councillor Linda Wootton. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Killy. I'm wearing the wrong glasses for distance vision. My apologies. So we will now vote. I beg your pardon, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I don't want to make a song and dance about it, but on page 17 of the agenda, page 13 of the minutes, I think, we received a report from about waste and recycling. The minutes record that members were reminded that public behaviour could not be controlled. Further down, it says that Lincolnshire County Council had no control over the waste that was presented by the public. This is inaccurate. We do have some control. If we didn't have any control, then people could throw rubbish all over the streets. So although we were told that Lincolnshire County Council has no control, I fundamentally disagree that we don't have any control. We do have controls. We could reject waste, and therefore I question. I'm not going to go as far as making a song and dance about it, but I want it noted that there are different interpretations of what we have been told.
I'm sure that will be noted. I think, without getting into how many angels are dancing on the head of a pin, there is a difference between control and influence. This council and our waste collection authorities certainly can and do seek to influence behaviour, but we cannot absolutely control it. I think that is the point that was being made. However, your comments are noted. Subject to that comment by Councillor Baxter, we've had it proposed, we've had it seconded. You're voting whether you agree that these minutes are a correct record. All those in favour, please show. Any abstentions? And any against? Thank you very much. Those minutes are agreed. And we now move on to item 4 of the agenda, announcements by the chairman, executive councillors and lead officers. And I will start as chairman. I would like to offer members an update on the motorhomes and caravans, motorhomes and camper vans working group. which met for the first time on the 8th of March to explore and understand the current proposition for motorhome tourism in Greater Lincolnshire and examine the potential to enhance this offer. The working group was informed that the number of motorhomes newly registered with the DVLA in 2020-2021 was over 16,000, an increase of 8% year on year, and bringing the total number in the UK to over 386,000. With each of those visitors estimated to spend £47 per night at their host destination within the visitor economy, appealing to this market segment has the potential to contribute some economic benefit. And a further working group meeting will be arranged for the end of April to explore the outcome from information gathering exercises with tourist operators and key contributors to the sector, which are currently ongoing, along with data gathered to further understand the potential value of the camper van and motorhomes market. And a report setting out the outcomes and recommendations from the working group is currently scheduled to be considered by the committee at our meeting on the 30th of May. I would like just to remind officers presenting that their reports should be taken as read. Therefore, you are welcome to only summarise key points and what is asked of by the committee before initiating the debate for each item. And can I remind all members, as I always do, of the importance of succinct questions and concise contributions. So we now move to Executive Councillor announcements. Are there any announcements from Councillor Colin Davey, Executive Councillor for Economic Development, Environment and Planning, or his supporting councillor, Councillor Tom Dyer? I know that we have Councillor Davey, I believe, online. Councillor Davey, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, members. Pleased to see you all on in such fine fettle in the chamber. I'm pleased to report, firstly, that there are a number of positive signs for growth for the UK economy and for Lincolnshire. The trading position of businesses appears to be improving. Nationally, more than 1 in 5 trading businesses expect turnover to increase in April of this year. Locally, there are signs of positivity, with businesses 60% are confident that they're going to reach their financial targets. Inflation pressures appear to be slowly easing on goods and services. This is, of course, absolutely essential for our businesses in this county. We know that energy and fuel remains a huge concern for all our businesses, as it does for households, and is a big factor in price rises more generally. And of course, food inflation continues to remain very high. So, as ever, I would encourage members to encourage businesses to seek support through the team at the Growth Hub and to make good use of the website too. The team continues to deliver packages of support to businesses. As an example, the first 6 months of the Made Smarter industrial digitalisation programme for manufacturers has been completed by the county on behalf of the East Midlands cluster. It continues to go from strength to strength, and we are delighted with the interest from our SME manufacturers in the county, in Leicestershire, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. Despite the challenges of a compressed start, the programme performance is excellent, with contract targets achieved in business engagement, business roadmaps, and 12 initial grants have already been awarded. As days get lighter for longer, many of us will be thinking about getting out to enjoy our wonderful county. I'm pleased to tell you that a vastly improved walks area on the visitlincolnshire.com website will launch in the next 2 weeks. With the tourism and countryside teams have worked together across the county to achieve this. There are some 200 walks, and it will provide an ease of use not currently provided on the existing site or on our own county site. Advanced searchability is the key to its success, including length of walk, level of difficulty and location. This is going to continue to boost the number of visitors to the county, as well as supporting local initiatives. We're planning a soft launch in April with a larger promotional campaign in May to celebrate Walking Month. Members will also maybe be aware of the announcement yesterday by government of a number of new World Heritage UNESCO sites, including one around the East Coast Superhighway. This is about bird watching in particular, and about the immense number of visitors we get from that fly down the coast to their sanctuaries in the winter months. So this includes Lincolnshire and Norfolk and the East Anglia roadmap down the entire coastline. We will work with the government to make sure that Lincolnshire's prominent role in bird watching and the natural environment is recognised as they move forward to hopefully the full award of World Heritage status. Members will be aware that Mary Powell came to this committee some time ago and talked about the opportunity of the natural environment, particularly bird watching, as a lever to boost tourism spend in the county. And I think this will take it to a much higher level. It's good to see we're being recognised as an important location at the highest level possible. Economic development officers operating on behalf of the Business Lincolnshire Growth Hub have been working with 10 local authority colleagues to agree a funding package that would support the delivery of a continued UK SPF shared service growth hub model that will be available to all businesses in Greater Lincolnshire, regardless of their postcode. This shared service would include business advisory and sectorial support, startup, scale-up and sector business support programs and business development events. At the time of writing, 7 out of 10 local authorities have either provided a positive response or have confirmed support for delivery under this model. We will now start to wind up the European funded services for existing inquiries, and from the 1st of May 2023, any new inquiries will be supported under the UK SPF arrangements for those authorities that have opted in. Finally, I wanted to update the committee following an announcement from the Chancellor stating that the government will consult on transferring responsibilities for local economic development from local enterprise partnerships to local authorities from April 2024. A 4-week consultation process is now underway, and government will then publish an updated policy position to confirm next steps by the summer. Across Greater Lincolnshire, we want to ensure that the voice of business in our area continues to be heard. The participation of the private sector has been critical to the success of LEX generally, but in particular here in Greater Lincolnshire. And we have a shared commitment to making sure that businesses play an active role in shaping economic policy going forward. Last year, the LEP held a series of events and activities to gauge the views of businesses on a devolution deal for our area. We have started discussions with civil servants about a county deal, and we want the LEP to continue to speak on behalf of businesses as we move forward. Therefore, we are of the view that until any devolution deal is implemented for our area, the role of the LEP will remain unchanged. At that point, Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions that members may have for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Davey. Before I turn to members, I just put a question myself really, and it ties together the first point you made and indeed the last point you made. The first point about the general economy, I think only this morning we've had further cautiously positive figures about retail numbers. We have not slid into the recession. The doom and gloom, which we were told would happen in some quarters, hasn't happened. So although we need to be cautious and understand the enormity of the energy price shock which the economy has suffered, would you agree that there are some hopeful signs? And I tie that to the last point that you made, and that is the general one, but the positive role that local government can play at all levels in actually encouraging the private enterprise, encouraging economic activity and prosperity, on which all the work that we do here depends.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Chairman. You absolutely hit the nail on the head. It's vitally important that local government and the business community work hand in glove to land those deals, those big inward investment opportunities, the expansion of sites that help our economy grow. And you're right, we should be cautiously optimistic. We are not in control of global events, and there are a lot of things happening probably under the radar more than in public gaze, that always remind us that one step forward can sometimes become 2 steps back. But I am cautiously optimistic, and I've always believed that Lincolnshire weathers any downturn in the economy better than most places because we are clever and because we work closely with our businesses to make sure that they are able to weather any storms that come their way as much as we can. So it is about partnership working, partnership delivery, and making sure that we support people when they need it, but let them grow and thrive on their own wings when we don't need to be involved.
Thank you for that. I'm looking around the chamber. Are there any questions from Councillor Bowles first?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered if Councillor Davey could provide us with an update regarding RAF Scampton and just update us really on what work this council's doing alongside West Lindsey to try and protect and ensure the £300 million proposed development for that site is not lost to the county and the district. So just wondered if we'd be able to get an update on that, please.
Probably not, Matt, from Councillor Bowles fully from me, but I will ensure that Councillor Bradwell, who takes the lead on these matters in terms of immigration issues, drops you a mail and updates you fully. I would say, however, that it is vitally important that the long-term future of Scampton includes this massive economic regeneration opportunity. And I am fully supportive of all plans that will get Scampton to play its full role in being a destination in its own right in the future. I will leave my other comments, I think, probably out of this meeting, but Councillor Bradwell, I will make sure drops you an email, Councillor Bowles, and updates you and copies the committee in since the question's been asked in public.
And next, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Councillor Davey, he's disappeared. Good morning, Councillor Davey.
Good morning.
I just wondered, with the withdrawal of, or the coming to an end of European funding at local level in terms of help and support of business and regeneration, you mentioned that other organisations, I don't know whether it's the local authority or other organisations, would that be a like-for-like funding? So in other words, the money that's been lost from Europe, would that be replaced by money from other sources?
Yeah, what has essentially happened is that the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is being administered by the district councils in two-tier areas and obviously in unitary areas by the unitary authority. So there has to be an agreement on how that money is spent. It's quite clear in my mind that local authorities that have already opted in, we will be able to deliver a good service. It might be slightly different, but it'll still be a good service. I am very concerned that we don't end up with a situation where some authorities are in, some authorities are out, and we end up with a reduced service in some areas that is vitally important to businesses to help them move forward. So negotiations are ongoing. I'm hopeful that we will we'll get to the right conclusion and that we'll have a good service for businesses needing support across the whole of the Greater Lincolnshire area. But we're not there quite yet. But we are, certainly in terms of we're working closely with Lincoln and the local authorities on this side of the county. We're just waiting for 3 of our authority partners to make their decisions on UK Shared Prosperity Fund and their contribution to the business growth hubs. So, but that's where we are right now, Councillor Kelly. I'm expecting that we're going to be able to offer a good service across the county.
Come back, Councillor Kelly.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Would it be possible at some point, obviously not immediately, but for us to have some feedback about how that's going in maybe in the next year so that we can actually see how it's progressing?
I'm happy to update the committee at the next meeting since we are aiming to have this in train by the 1st of May. So I will happily update the committee accordingly, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking around the chamber. I'm seeing no further hands raised. We have Councillor Davies, support councillor in the chamber with us. Councillor Dyer, are there any issues you wish to add? Seeing none, we can now turn to senior officers. Are there any announcements from lead officers this morning? And I'm seeing a general shaking of heads around the chamber, so we can take that as a no. And we will move on to the discussion items on this morning's agenda. So we begin with item 5, which is the Theddlethorpe Geological Disposal Facility Working Group 6-monthly update. This report is on pages 21 to 25 of the agenda pack. The report provides an update on development at the former Theddlethorpe gas terminal and explains the work being undertaken by the community partnership and the opportunities for investment that are now starting to be better understood. In terms of actions for the committee, the actions required are 1. Review and comment on the progress of the community partnership and note that its public engagements programme will continue through the siting process for the geological disposal facility. And 2, support the work being carried out to take advantage of the opportunities for investment in strategic infrastructure and for employment and business supply chains. Now, the report will be presented by Justin Brown, Assistant Director of Growth. But before I turn to Justin, I've received, and I suspect other members of the committee may have received, emails from at least one individual and also from a local group in the area where the facility is being explored. And I just wanted really for the benefit of local people and also for members to remind us that we are not the decision-making body. The final decision on this matter will be taken quite properly by the people who live in that area. We are not the decision-making body. This committee, and indeed the executive board of the County Council and the County Council itself, voted that it would take part in the working group to make sure that that working group, including of course local people, had the resources it needed. And I remember when I was sitting in this chamber and the matter was discussed, I made the point that I wanted to make sure those residents had the resources to ask the toughest questions and probe the answers that they were given. So I just say that as a preamble. We are not the decision-making body. We are here to assist the inquiries, but ultimately it will be quite properly the local people in that area themselves who take the decision. So that having, I hope, been clarified, and I hope, by the way, that is of some reassurance to local people. One of the letters I had made reference to the fact that they felt this committee was being invited to support something. We are neither supporting nor opposing. What we do support is providing the resources to make sure that those questions are asked as the people wish them to be asked by the body, that, including local people, which is entrusted with doing that work. So, that preamble out of the way. Justin, over to you.
Chairman, thank you. So, recognising what you've just said, I will focus in on 2 particular issues during this paper. The first one is the progress of the community partnership, and then the second one is the issues which relate to possible further investment. So, quick reminder that from our perspective, we see ourselves engaging with nuclear waste services in the same way as we do with any other investor. So we are working to say, if an investment takes place in this location, what would the opportunity be to develop new solutions and to give new opportunities to people? So in terms of the community partnership, it has now met 4 times. I've put at the bottom of page 22 the group of people who are involved in the partnership. The partnership has a formal terms of reference which I would summarise. Of course there is more detail, but I would summarise as saying is very much focused around 2 things. Number 1, providing information about what a geological disposal facility is, both positive and negative, in order to inform the community. And number 2, the management of a community investment fund which provides small grants to the local community. So the partnership has met 4 times, as I say. It has undertaken a number of engagement events. 31 at the time of writing. I think it's probably about 34 now, something like that, with around about 300 people who've attended. They have commissioned Nuclear Waste Services to hold drop-in sessions once a week in Mablethorpe, and they've produced a website. It's fair to say that we continue to encourage them to make sure that website is as updated and as broad in its information as possible. Now, in terms of feedback from the drop-in sessions and from the specific engagement events, there are some people who are attending who are clearly very against the proposition. There are some people who are interested in finding out more. And that engagement process will continue throughout the siting process up to and including the time of a community vote, which is still some years away. All of the processes in the community partnership operate on the basis of the government's standard policy for geological disposal facilities. So you have a local partnership which is developing and commissioning engagement activity in the best way for the area, and they are doing so in the context of some national guidance. I mentioned the Community Investment Fund. The partnership have now received a handful of applications, and they hope to make decisions on their first set of bids towards the end of June. The budget is £1 million a year, which is a significant amount of money for a community grant scheme anyway, and in a relatively small area means it is going to be something which provides a lot of opportunity but will be very difficult to get the greatest benefit from. The team at Nuclear Waste Services have now staffed up so that there are people to assist community groups in attracting that funding. In terms of economic impact, that's where the point I make about us working with NWS, the same as any other investor comes in. Nuclear Waste Services have produced a report which suggests that a geological disposal facility will create at least 4,000 jobs. That's a third in the construction phase, a third who would operate on the site, and a third which is as a result of greater spending power in the community. We've challenged them a bit on that and asked them to produce a more localised report which assesses the skills provision and the availability of labour in that area to ensure that the absolutely correct information is being provided to the community and to education and learning providers as well. Significant additional infrastructure is important within the government's policy on geological disposal facilities provision that the government will invest in extra infrastructure. Now, this is a statement in the policy and a commitment from government, but there is no formal bidding process, no formal business planning process, etc. So we're needing to be highly tactical in the way we address this. But one of the things that we are doing is starting to identify major infrastructure activity, particularly around flooding, around training, around transport, around environment, in order to try and benefit from that government commitment for significant additional infrastructure. And I'll just conclude with reference to a couple of other things which are relevant to the debate. The first one is that Nuclear Waste Services are not the only organisation who are interested in that particular site. So our Planning and Regulation Committee received a presentation from Harbour Energy, for example, who are looking at the site as part of their Humber carbon capture initiative. Now, we were surprised that the week before last, when the government did its energy announcements, that it did not give a licence to the Humber carbon capture scheme. We were expecting that to move forward. We are talking to Harbour now to find out what that means. They're expecting to move forward in a second wave. So there is still other interest in the site from there, and we're aware of a couple of other possible investors who have spoken with National Grid on a confidential basis around their interest in the site as well. And then the very final thing, Chairman, is that as well as geological disposal facility on the extreme east of the county, there is, of course, now the fusion plant proposed for West Burton, just a couple of miles over the border at the extreme west of the county. And that particular proposal is very, very similar to the proposal for geological disposal facility, in that it is within an energy and particularly nuclear sphere. It will generate significant jobs. It could have a significant impact on the infrastructure and on the training situation in the area. And we have arranged for the people who are sponsoring that particular programme to come and give a briefing at the council in early summer so that we can be more aware of it. But we are engaged in that, and we see significant parallels between geological disposal facility and fusion in terms of their economic impact. So to conclude, community partnership has met 4 times. An engagement programme is happening. The grant funding programme has started, and we are now working around trying to develop programmes which will attract that significant additional infrastructure investment into the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. We'll turn now to questions. I have some, but I think the Vice Chairman is going first.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's more alluding to what the Chairman mentioned earlier. I'm sure we're all aware of different organisations coming forward to represent their views to us, and I appreciate that we don't make decisions. But one thing that did sort of get me to go, oh yeah, was to do with the Community Investment Fund. Now, I appreciate £1 million a year for a really small area sounds like a lot of money. And obviously, considering we're just a consultee, the email I got basically said that it's match funding. And I appreciate that that's the process that a lot of grant funding goes down. My concern is that potentially that £1 million may or may not just be an arbitrary figure, because if it's match funding in a small area, the chances of them raising £1 million to maximise that grant funding is pretty much not going to happen after maybe the first year if they're lucky. So I have a slight concern about that. So if we could get a bit more information as a follow-up for that, that would be great. And I appreciate you said that the group, when they last met, set the investment fund priorities. So it may just be that someone's misconstrued it, and that it's a point where obviously it would be ranked higher on a potential bid if it had match funding. So if you could clarify that. And then the other concern I have is to do with the engagement. Now, I appreciate, based on Lincolnshire County Council engagement activities, Boston Borough Council, so the only ones I have experience of, we don't always potentially get a high turnout. And I appreciate, again, it's not our engagement sessions, but if you look at the questionnaire for Feddlethorpe feedback, the vast majority of that was, we don't have enough information. And I appreciate that Nuclear Waste Services may be doing everything they can to try and disseminate their information, but if we could liaise with them to try and think of other ways to get people to be able to digest the information. I appreciate you said they're putting on a weekly forum, essentially, to come and chat about stuff, but we all know that, you know, rural isolation, if you don't drive and you're trapped in your house and it's 10 miles down the road, you may not be able to get there, and you may not have good access to the internet. So even if it's just by postage or anything like that, because obviously when they did the questionnaires, there was quite a large response rate locally. So that's my only 2 points. If you could come back on those. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, so in terms of the Community Investment Fund, I was party to the last community partnership meeting, and there was a debate there which essentially said there is no need for any project to have match funding in order to bid to that grant scheme. Projects could be prioritised if they had match funding, but it's all about outcomes and benefits. So that's the point on that one. In terms of engagement, absolutely. We are very, very keen that nuclear waste services make sure that the engagement goes as far and as regularly to as many people as possible. And certainly one way of engagement does not fit the way that everybody takes in information. And I know it's a point that Councillor Hill has made at the community partnership, and that whilst our meetings with NWS, as I say, are more on the investment side, nonetheless we are making the same point. And the team at NWS has recently increased in size to enable them to get more boots on the ground. So I'm hoping that they're hearing the message, but it's really helpful that you raise it this morning because it amplifies it as an issue.
Thank you very much indeed. And next we have Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of questions, if that's possible. First one is, does the proposal, is it solely for UK radioactive waste, or is it to get waste in from other countries? And the second one is, what effect on the infrastructure for transporting the waste to the proposed site? Does it have an effect on our highways, rail, or sea? Thank you.
So, as far as I am aware, and according to the policy that government have set as it stands, this is for UK waste. I will read into that and double check for you, but as far as I'm aware, UK waste. In terms of infrastructure, that is primarily why we are engaging with nuclear waste services, because if there are significant volume of traffic, both in terms of waste being delivered and in terms of staff movements, then that will inevitably have a significant impact on the infrastructure. And in the same way as we would with any other developer, we will be identifying those improvements that are absolutely necessary in order to make sure that there is no negative impact on the community. Like that, for example. So you'll also be pleased to hear that the Nuclear Waste Services team have got a number of work streams in play at the moment in what they call their pre-siting process. And that includes, amongst other things, an analysis of the transport requirements to the site. And as I say, the commitment of government for significant additional infrastructure, in addition to the developer's own requirements, mean that we ought to be able to identify pretty quickly as the siting process develops those infrastructure improvements that are required for the area.
Thank you, Justin. We move now, I think, to Councillor Killy.
Thank you. It's good to know that the investment allocation doesn't require much funding. And have I understood correctly that you are because it seems strange that if £1 million a year is available, and at the moment it's been under-allocated because firms in the area aren't bidding for that funding. Am I right in understanding that you're helping firms to bid? I mean, is there a criteria for allocation, or how is it allocated is really what I'm asking, and what can be done to encourage firms to benefit from the money available?
So the Community Investment Fund has set criteria which include both businesses being able to submit bids, but also community groups. And you would expect community and voluntary groups to be the people who bid for the most of that funding. Now, we are not advising and supporting because Nuclear Waste Services has a team whose job is to do exactly that. So they have a team of people who go out and promote the Community Investment Fund to communities, to businesses and so on, and also help people to produce their business plans and produce their business cases. What we have done, again, which we would do with any other developer, is to say our experience of running community grant fund schemes in that area has led us to recognise that these are the issues that need to be solved in terms of developing projects. And we've also, we ran the Leader Coastal Action Zone programme, which put £2 million a year into the area for the last 6 years. We had a bit of a waiting list, and so we've identified and shared that waiting list with the team at Nuclear Waste Services. So we've done a few things to provide advice and support, but it isn't us who are actually going out and providing advice to the communities. That's what the Nuclear Waste Services team are doing. Criteria is very much around helping to grow the economy at a local level. It's very much around helping to improve employment opportunities, and it's very much around helping to improve the community infrastructure in the area.
I mean, some of the community groups, are they not concerned about health? I mean, I wouldn't know, because it would be really useful to know what some of the community groups are that are bidding, because, you know, it's I would imagine that they are, if I lived in the area, I would be quite worried about it, because it's an unknown quantity. And I think one of the things that's in the report from Thedlethorpe Village residents, because of increased participation, they said that they'd had their eyes opened and they weren't, you know, they didn't have the initial reaction that you would expect. But it would be interesting to know what the community groups are interested in and what they're worried about. And I would have thought they would be worried about health. I don't know whether other people think that.
So I guess analysis of what the community groups are feeding back to Nuclear Waste Services is something for the community partnership rather than us. I, as I said, have been encouraging Nuclear Waste Services to make sure they update their website with the relevant information. I know that's something that they're working on, and they will constantly summarise what's coming out of the engagement groups, and that will provide us with some of the information that answers that question. At the moment, that's not something that we are directly engaged in, though.
Thank you very much. We now move to Councillor Sear. Noy.
Good morning, Chair and Justin. I have a few questions to ask Councillor Keelan about what the Thedlethorpe residents feel about the health. They have a nightmare, okay? Thedlethorpe Village is a rural area. It's picturesque, naturally served. Everybody king on their seat and the home. One question I want to ask, you say how they go to transport it. On the circulation, it go to combined railway. We don't have a railway anymore, they should. So that means if they go to combined rail, they got to buy land that the people already live there. So that will spoil. Other circular say they might combine both from that side, a Humber, to come on the sea. Other point I want to make is it is nuclear waste, you know, nuclear thing go around, they have information to let residents and local people know, but it look good, but they not physically point what the resident ask, you know, like to say what could happen, what outcome. £1 million a year for first 5 years. Everybody away to community, but the community for my own feeling, not the councillor, at the resident, at the Thedlethorpe. £1 million, it sounds a lot of money. But in reality, if you go to live with it for another 125 years, it's not a lot of money. And if you have community partnership meeting every month, you have full 14 people From I heard you're looking for 2 more local business. And post how you go to work. You know much funding, but the first million are about to run out by end of this June. Is the community money is to go for like the local village who put the bid in, or go to the local business who want to put the bid, or local council put the bid in for solar panel, and that is not benefit on the people who live in the area. Satasop area, Village Salau, where the main is, we don't have a low cost house. I'm not saying again low cost house, but you have to think, you got to put the people like in Wally and sleep at night to say what could happen. You need more update because the resident at Satasop, they keep look on the website, and you have monthly meeting. You nearly 6 weeks behind, not updated the mark meeting yet. So that's how they got information to say it much funding. Somehow you got to work a bit quicker. You have a meeting every month. You put agenda, should be set away, so let people know what's going on. But trust me, it sometimes is people sing, people do on search on the internet. It not might be not like information. Somehow, nuclear waste need to put the people, in faith into it. It's a reality. Post, from my point, it's like carbon capsule. Don't need pump. They can come ahead and have it on the side. Nuclear seem to be up into it. But I think somehow, if you go to the local vote, and I will campaign for it to make sure the people in Lao area, Satasop, and the Mablesop area who got light to work, not people outside. But from my understanding, sometimes it depends where things come into. People might in Grimsby got light to work for where I live. And I'm not agree with that. If you can put that straight, because if you go carbon, things come from what that would the Humber to come here, and they got light to work for where I live. I don't think, but it's something you got to give information more and less than a Satasop. They're absolutely, and the elderly, and I cannot see 4,000 jobs. Where these people coming from? 4,000 jobs. In the next 100 years, I cannot see half a Mablesop. They are retired people. It won't be the local job. So I'm worried. I'm the resident, and I turn out to be council as well. So it's not looking worrying, in my opinion. Anyhow, thank you.
Okay, Justin, would you like to unpick those issues raised by Councillor Sear, please?
Happily, Chairman. And headline, I couldn't agree more. I've written down 6 points there. So first of all, in terms of the transport issue, we still do not know enough about the proposal, and that is the work that Nuclear Waste Services are currently doing. We are the Strategic Transport Authority, and therefore we have responsibilities and duties that mean that they need to engage with us very effectively on that, and we will be ensuring that we take that role. Secondly, you mentioned the need for Nuclear Waste Services to hear the feedback from the community better than perhaps they are doing. And again, I agree wholeheartedly with that, and we will push them on that particular issue. You spoke about making sure that any grant scheme activity has a direct benefit on individuals in the area. And again, I would absolutely support that, and to give you some reassurance, the interim chairman of the community partnership, John Collins, is very, very strong on that and is challenging the Nuclear Waste Services team to undertake exactly that through the way that they are developing projects. Website being updated, yes, we're pushing and pushing, and again, as with Councillor Griggs, your comments are extremely helpful in that we can demonstrate the importance. I was really interested in your point on carbon capture. We do not know what happens next, though we expect that the government will announce some form of second wave around carbon capture. It's still early days, but we do have a regular dialogue with people at Harbour Energy because they have approached us as a planning authority, and I will very happily feedback your comments about them needing to communicate better with the local community. And the final point you mentioned is around jobs and local jobs. One of the pieces of significant additional infrastructure that we are working on at the moment is to identify the best way that Lincolnshire's colleges can provide training in the skills that are required in the project, both at construction and operation phase. And let's remember that construction is several years away, and operation even more so if a vote takes place. And therefore, many of the people who will be working on the construction and on the operation, if the project goes ahead, will be people who are currently not even at school yet. So there is something that we're trying to do, which is very much around making sure that nuclear waste services support the education sector in the area in order to help people see those job opportunities for what they are.
Thank you very much, Justin, for that comprehensive reply. Councillor Sear, a quick response, please.
Anyway, thank you very much. Good. I please now. I came a replacement, so I don't know what happened today. Thank you for all the questions answered. Thank you.
It's called good fortune, I think, Councillor Sear. Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just coming back to the investment funds again. Obviously, I don't live in that area. I don't know it very well at all. But it would strike me that the reason there's very small uptake in applying for these grants is that I would imagine the local residents see a stigma attached to it, that if they apply for this money, they're in somehow supporting the project and are in favour of it. So I'm not surprised that there is low applications, because I would guess that's what a lot of these community groups see and think. So I think there would need to be a lot of work around detaching that. And then leading on from that, my question is, you've said the decision to do this could be a few years down the line, so 5-6 years, £1 million a year, so could potentially be £5-6 million investment. Are there any strings attached to this? Or are they, could they get to that point and the decision be made that this doesn't go forward? They've invested £5-6 million in community projects. Are there any conditions to any of these grants that money can be clawed back, would have to be repaid, anything like that that might be putting people off applying for it? Thank you.
So I'm not surprised that not many people have applied yet, and that's because with any grant programme, the first year is always very slow. So I'm not reading as much into that as you are. Any area that forms a community partnership will have access to the grants. So at the moment, there are 2 community partnerships in Cumbria, and there is the community partnership in Lincolnshire. So there are 3 lots of £1 million a year currently running. It goes up to £2.5 million a year when certain geological research starts to take place. There is no requirement that if the geological disposal facility does not take place, that the money be repaid. There will, of course, be the normal rules about managing public money, but certainly the bids that are being made for similar projects in Cumbria, and there will be 1 geological disposal facility. At the moment there are 3 partnerships, so by the very nature 2 of those areas will receive grants, but there will not be a geological disposal facility in their area, and that's part of the government's policy.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm looking around to see further questions. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a few. One was about the interaction with the parish. One of the pieces of correspondence that I got, I assume we all got, mentions that there's been a burden on the parish council in terms of working as some kind of intermediary. That may be sorted out by the elections on May the 4th, where there seems to be a relatively healthy list of nominations to the parish council, although it is uncontested. So what is the county doing to support the parish council and the parish councillors in standing their ground with the NWS and residents in terms of managing their role as a stakeholder? On the Community Investment Fund, I think I've heard the answers that the money is from Nuclear Waste Services. The decision is made by Nuclear Waste Services. We rejoice when any funding comes to the council, to the county area for community investment, but it's not money that we have much say over. Obviously, it's welcome that we have a councillor on the community partnership to represent the county case. The decision about whether or not this GDF goes ahead is with the local community. Is there a system? Is it a straightforward kind of referendum of the people within the catchment, or is it that East Lindsey get a vote and county get a vote and then the residents get a vote, or is there what is the system for crossing the line of yes, it's acceptable, or no, it isn't? On economic impact, Councillor Sear has mentioned the 1,300 jobs or the 4,000 jobs and the infrastructure to go with them. If you said that around a third of the jobs, so approximately 1,300, will be long term, what kind of infrastructure would we expect to support those 1,300 new residents? Because as Councillor Sear says, it's not going to be people who've retired to the coast that are going to take these jobs. It's 1,300 people that are going to be relatively new to the area, mostly. I do think that the report, careful with my words, but appears sympathetic to what you describe as this significant additional infrastructure investment to the area. Residents have spotted that there is a potential downside to this additional infrastructure investment, and that is the disposal of nuclear waste on their doorstep. I think that the account in your paragraph about the community partnership, which talks about the residents' report, seems a bit dismissive of the residents' report, and yet one resident who wandered into a nuclear waste services event is quoted second-hand as having his eyes opened and the light switched on because he or she had been blinkered before. I'm sure that you could find a dozen people that had a different experience and another dozen people who had a similar experience. I don't think that comment is representative or helpful. And finally, I am interested in the reference to the West Burton Tomacac fusion facility. You said it's a similar or related application. This is not disposal, is it? This is the creation of a nuclear fusion facility on the border of our county. It is a related industry, but how does that Tokamak fusion facility relate to this particular project? Why have we included mention of that within this report? I think that's enough, Chair. Thanks.
Chairman, thank you. So in terms of working with parish council and nuclear waste services to ensure that the voice is properly understood, our work is primarily working both through Councillor Hill as a member of the community partnership and through our team, as I've described earlier, in terms of ensuring that nuclear waste services will be very open and understanding of all of the pieces of comment, advice and information that they receive. They have recently appointed a community development manager whose role is specifically to engage with members of the community partnership, and I would see that as taking what you describe as some of the burden away from the parish council. In terms of community investment fund decision making, just to confirm, the decision and the decision for grants of a certain scale is with the community partnership. If the grants are above a certain scale, then the community partnership makes a recommendation to a board within Nuclear Waste Services. Threshold is certainly a six-figure sum, so it would be unusual for a community project to meet that threshold. In terms of infrastructure to support employees, then that is exactly the work that we are currently doing, and that is about ensuring that people are able to travel to and from work as effectively as possible, that they are trained in order to be able to carry out work as effectively as possible, that their homes are protected from flooding, and that they have a business supply chain, which means that where possible, small business in the area can win contracts. So we see that as the way that we would look to support, and those are the sorts of schemes that we are currently exploring. And in terms of relationship between fusion and geological disposal facility, the starting process of undertaking site evaluation and analysis requires very much the same type of technical businesses, whether that's geologists, whether it's drone pilots, whether it is architects, etc. The build of a significant piece of civil engineering will involve the same type of businesses, will require the same type of skills, from project management through to people working on an operative basis, and the operation will require again a set of very parallel jobs. Now, if you expect that people travel for between 45 and 60 minutes to a job, then you could put concentric circles around the two locations and you'll see an overlap. And therefore, what we can believe is that there are opportunities for the same supply chain businesses, the same technological businesses, same education training providers, to deliver support which is required for both facilities. And those are the similarities that we're seeking to describe in this report, and that we are seeking to try and make the most of.
Thank you very much indeed. A very, very quick one, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. The one that I didn't get an answer to, I think, was the actual decision as to whether or not to go ahead.
Yep. Justin, the actual decision-making process.
So the national policy says that it is a vote exclusively for the residents in the area.
Thank you very much for that. I've given us much longer than was actually scheduled for this item because I know it is a matter of enormous importance for the county and of great interest to members in this committee and indeed our residents. I'm just going to raise a couple of further points myself. Justin, on the issue of the potential for carbon capture, can you yet clarify, we've discussed this before, and I'm just wondering whether you can yet clarify whether if a carbon capture operation emerges which does want to definitely go ahead at this site, whether that would be mutually exclusive with a possible nuclear facility or whether the two could coexist. Do we know the answer to that yet, or don't we?
From what I understand, the two sponsoring organisations have had some conversations. I do not know what the outcome is at this stage, though.
One that we will keep an eye on, I think. And the final comment that I would make is I'm very grateful to you for the briefing on fusion. I do think that's enormously important. I absolutely recognise that the science behind fusion and the science behind fission, very, very different kinds of science. Really one word, nuclear, ties them together. But the fission programme, which is what we've had so far, requires nuclear fuel and it produces volumes of nuclear waste. And that is what I grew up very close to, because most of it is stored currently at what's now called Sellafield in West Cumberland, and I lived a few miles down the road from it. So I have a personal interest in this matter, which I would declare. But I think that we are, after all, the Environment and Economy Committee. I know from my own personal experience that the economic impact of a nuclear campus as at, let's call it Sellafield, on the local area was enormous, but clearly, as we also know from the history of that site, the potential environmental impacts are also very great. So to have an early briefing on that, and a briefing on that different kind of science, and of the economic potential and the environmental potential, I think is very important, and I think the committee would welcome that, Justin. We thank you for it. Right. Members, we have, as I have said, spent 20 minutes longer on this than was programmed, but that I think was absolutely right to do. So we move to the proposal, because I see no further questions raised from the floor, and that is this. I move that the committee has reviewed the progress of the community partnership and notes that its public engagement programme will continue throughout the siting process for the geological disposal facility, and that we support the work being carried out to take advantage of the opportunities for investment in strategic infrastructure and for employment and business supply chains. And that does not, we support the work, it does not imply that we endorse or oppose the programme. That is for the local residents. We are here to ask questions, and we have done that, I think, from all sides of the chamber very effectively this morning. So, do we have any dissent from that? One. No other dissent. In that case, that matter is by majority agreed. Thank you very much for your contributions on that. We now stay in the field of energy as we move to item 6 on the agenda, Energy for Growth, Energy Options Analysis for Greater Lincolnshire, Interim Report. This report is on pages 27 to 61 of the agenda pack. The committee is invited to consider the interim report attached at Appendix A on the energy options analysis for Greater Lincolnshire, which has been completed by the consultants Ryder, Levitt, Bucknall, referred to in the report as RLB. Any comments that the committee may have on the interim report can be given to the consultants by the 12th of April and be considered for the final report. The committee will then consider the final report at our meeting on the 11th of July. And the actions before us, the actions required by the committee are to review and comment on the contents of the interim report on the energy options analysis for Greater Lincolnshire, and that report will be presented by Mick King, Head of Economic Infrastructure, who's been waiting very patiently this morning. Over to you, Mick.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to give some context, last October we brought a report...
Sorry, Mick, could you just, for the benefit of everybody, move your microphone a bit closer? We can't quite hear.
Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. Just for context, last October we presented a report to committee on the Energy for Growth work programme, and in February we circulated an update on that. This paper is concerned with one of the elements within one of the 4 work streams, the intelligence work stream, which is, as the Chairman said, the Energy Options Analysis for Greater Lincolnshire Commission, and the interim report is attached. The paper has been brought to committee to give the committee opportunity to pass any comments back to the consultants to be considered for their final report. And the main outcome of the Commission is to answer the 4 propositions set out on page 2 of the committee's paper. Also, in answering those propositions, the consultants are delivering 5 specific pieces of work, again set out on page 2. The key findings from the interim report, there are 3, which are that there is a clear shift towards innovation and alternative energy sources across the region, that net zero is a common theme across all sectors, which is echoed by the shift in energy providers and an increase in private investment, and that there is, unfortunately, inconsistent collaboration across the region. Also, in producing a report, A good working relationship has been developed with the two distribution network operators, which are formerly Western Power Distribution, now National Grid Energy Distribution, and Northern Power Grid, which operate across the area. And that's been particularly around understanding where growth priorities are in Lincolnshire in the short, medium and longer term, and how those DNOs may respond to that. The next steps are that a final report will be issued in May, and that's a contractual date. And then we will produce a work plan of action to optimise the benefits that have been highlighted through this study for both residents and businesses in the area. As the Chairman said at the start, any comments that the committee may have on the interim report can be forwarded to the consultants for consideration in the final report, and we would invite those, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mick. I'm looking around the room to see if we have any comments from members. I'm seeing none yet, so... Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. You can rely on me. I'm interested in how little mention there is of solar in this. I mean, certainly in my ward, and I'm sure in many other wards across the county, solar is a hot topic, to say the least, and something that the county at least has an opinion on, even if it's not the decision-making body in some ways. How can an energy options appraisal of Greater Lincolnshire not have at least some more detailed reference to green energy? And I mean, for that matter, the reference to the thing we've just been speaking about, the is it Barton? I can't remember the name of the scheme. It was in the previous paper, the one that's on the border. Sorry, Burton.
West Burton.
Burton, I beg your pardon, yes. So West Burton is looming, and then we've got all these non-nationals NSIP projects which are looming, and then we've got smaller solar which is looming, and all these surely are either part of the solution or part of the problem for the county's energy supply. Some of these NSIP projects claim to be able to produce sufficient electrical output to supply an entire district. So where is it in this report?
Mick, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think two answers there, Councillor Baxter. One is that this is the interim report, and I think in there it does highlight in red the areas that will be added to for the final report. In terms of West Burton, that's a very long-term scheme, and the report is really from the consultants rather than the committee paper is really based on analysis of supply and demand now, in terms of how that may affect growth in the short and medium term. And I would have thought that the West Burton facility, although it will be mentioned in the final report, won't really feature in that analysis because it's too long term. In terms of solar, again, I know that will be included in the final report. As you say, they are NISP applications currently, so again, they're not immediate, but they are important to take account of. Although many of those are, if not all of those, are from private providers, not from the main distribution network operators. And that's been the focus of the conversations because they are the biggest suppliers of energy into the county, the DNOs.
Yes, they are private providers, but do we have in this country any public providers? Do we have any public generators other than perhaps ourselves at the energy from waste facility, which I'm not sure if that's public or private, somewhere in between. And also then, does it, maybe I should have looked more carefully, but do we take account of the offshore facilities in this report?
Mick, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the offshore facilities are featured in the report. And yes, to repeat the earlier response, the solar installations that are proposed will feature in the final report, and a comment on their scale in the context of being compared to the facilities provided by the DNOs.
I think it's worth remembering, colleagues, that when we talk about solar, there are really two channels to this. One is the very large scale commercial solar, and we have a number of applications in or bordering Lincolnshire which are current at the moment. And the other, of course, is the installation of solar on domestic properties, and housing is referenced here in the report. On that latter thing, I would just remind colleagues that there are changes to the building regulations which will very strongly encourage the provision of renewables in new domestic housing. And also, I can certainly say in part of Lincolnshire, which is covered by the Central Lincolnshire Joint Local Plan, which is North Kesteven, the City of Lincoln and West Lindsey, we have just had confirmation. I say we declare an interest because I'm Deputy Leader of North Kesteven and I'm a representative to that body. We've just had confirmation from the Planning Inspectorate that some very ambitious changes to the local plan will actually allow us within that area to very strongly encourage solar, basically to demand renewables on every new house that's built. So that is something that every local planning authority has the ability to do, and if they haven't done it yet, I very much hope that they will. Can I just raise a question? It says on page 28, Mick, bullet point 4 of the 5 you mentioned, scope 2 housing sites to be established where more collaborative energy approach can deliver commercially viable net zero. I would just draw to your attention that we have a number of sustainable urban extensions. The one with the best planning behind it, I'm proud to say, is the one which is not only in North Kesteven, but actually largely in my ward, or a chunk of it's in my ward, which is the Southeast Quadrant Sustainable Urban Extension, or SEQ-SUE. I flag that and other SUEs because there will be house building over the next 15, 20 years at scale. They are relatively early in the planning process, although that process has in some cases started. But you've got permissions at the moment, I think, for over 1,000 of 3,500 units in the first plan period. Those might be helpful to point out to our consultants because generating renewable electricity, either through solar panels or indeed through area ground source, which is much more efficient than air source facilities, is something I would very much like, and I'm sure colleagues would like to see explored. We do have those developments going on in Lincolnshire. If we could draw those to our consultants' attention, and if they are going to pick it up, happily put them in touch through me with the relevant planners so we can take that forward. Do we have any other comments from the floor? Councillor Griggs?
Yeah, thank you very much. Forgive potentially my naivety, I'm not an expert when it comes to energy, but I read the report and I read it a couple of times because there was a few bits in there I wasn't particularly sure of. There's a couple of points that I don't feel has been raised, and whilst it may not seem hugely relevant, you know, the title of the report is Energy Options Analysis for Greater Lincolnshire, and it doesn't mention the fact that the capacity of the grid. Now, my understanding is that, you know, in all fairness, we could build a ginormous nuclear plant slap bang in the middle of Lincolnshire, not suggesting that, but just saying we could, but we couldn't put the energy into the grid because the grid's not big enough. So surely that should be a concern in the report, that regardless of what energy we need, obviously can we first of all meet the energy requirements needed because of the limitations on the infrastructure, as well as generating it. And also, obviously, there's a big old push away from petrol cars towards electric vehicles. And that's, at least on some of the things I've read, that's going to be a massive burden on energy infrastructure in parts of the country where the grid is sufficient. So surely that should have some bearing on future demand or energy options, because, again, a lot of old buildings, the funding for putting things like solar panels on is reducing and moving more towards new builds. Well, obviously, we're going to find ourselves in a position where if you need to charge your electric car and you can't generate your own electricity because you're not in a new house, and you can't, in all fairness, you're probably not going to afford an electric car in that case in the first place. But it just seems there's a few key considerations that I feel should have probably been in the report because they're quite prevalent to the energy situation and they're not referenced at all, at least that I can see.
Mick.
Thank you, Chairman. For going reverse order, in terms of supply and demand and capacity of the grid, yeah, that's a key outcome of the report, and it's not presented today, but there are a lot of maps that have been produced, rag-rated maps of supply currently and forecast and demand by working with all 10 authorities in Greater Lincolnshire to look at what the demand is from plan applications, authorities' own developments, etc. So that grid capacity, as is termed, is certainly featured in the background work and will feature in the final report. I know those rag rating layered JS maps, which are referenced at the final bullet point, have been really well received in sort of showing where the pinch points are. In terms of the switch to low electric vehicles, yeah, we'll feed that back as something to be considered to see how that can feature in the recommendations coming out.
I was going to pick up on the Deputy Vice Chairman's points myself, but before I do, I'm going to bring in Councillor Davey, who is with us on the internet. Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Chairman. And firstly, I want to concur with your view that the ability to make new homes as close to zero carbon as possible is something that has been achievable for a long time. And obviously, I welcome that commitment from the Central Links authorities to deliver more in that line going forward. I hope other authorities in Lincolnshire will take up that baton. We all know that in the strategic economic plan, there is an ambition to build another 100,000 new homes across Greater Lincolnshire. We're nowhere near that target being met. Those homes do need to be energy efficient. We need to integrate technology into them to reduce costs on the end user of that property. The bigger challenge, of course, though, is this. We are inundated. We're probably, I would say, under attack in relation to NSIP applications. There are some more coming down the track, which I shall be notifying members of very shortly. So we are inundated with applications for large solar farms and other energy projects. I'm very clear that Lincolnshire will play its role in terms of the national picture, but we're not to be a dumping ground for the south of England's energy production. There are plenty of poor quality land options in the south of England where solar could be utilised. I'd like to see some members of our cabinet proposing some of those, rather than just thinking that it's okay to put them in Lincolnshire and elsewhere. So it's about balance. It's about making sure we actually have a grid, as Councillor Griggs has said. We have no capacity in our grid to do the things we want to do economically. So we need a massive improvement in the grid infrastructure if we're going to make Greater Lincolnshire the place that we all want it to be in the future. So energy is a massive picture. It's confused at best, I would say. But if we all focus on what the outcomes are, which is good quality new homes, delivered with renewable energy as part of them, and we work with government on improving our grid, then I think we might have a chance in the future. But I'll leave my comments there, Chairman, but I just wanted to share those thoughts. I think that we sometimes lose sight of the big picture in dealing with some of the smaller stuff. And, I think solar is a technology where there's a lot of investment companies looking to make returns. I'm not sure people have dealt with the intermittency and battery storage issues of those sites in a way that's going to be properly integrated into the supply for the UK nation. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much for those comments, Councillor Davey. I now turn to Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I would come back to Councillor Davey and ask, when we're offered a nuclear waste disposal facility, it's described as a significant additional infrastructure investment. When we're offered solar PV arrays, we're under attack and we're inundated. It seems a different use of language. My question is, how much has this report cost, or how much will this report from Ryder, Levitt and Bucknell cost?
Mr. King, are you able to answer that, or would you bring that back to a further meeting? It's not something I'm familiar with.
it was subject to a competitive process. I just need to take advice, Chairman, on whether there's any commercial sensitivity to that.
In that case, we'll take advisement on that one, and should it be possible, we will come back to the committee. Justin, you wish to add something?
Probably worth remembering as well, net cost to LCC and total cost are two different things. Each of the district councils in the area also financially contributed.
Fine, we'll pursue that off-grid, as it were. I'll turn my microphone back on. I think the key theme that has come out of this is the flexibility of the grid and the limitations of the grid. And I think I'm sure all the comments made today will be captured and passed on to the consultants. But I would ask that particular emphasis is given to the weakness of the grid, which certainly in my view, and I suspect colleagues in the chamber would agree, is a significant impairment to our potential for economic growth. I have a personal involvement, I've referred to it in this chamber before, with the Sleaford Moor Enterprise Park and its development, and I know the enormous challenges of getting electrical goodness in and also of getting electrical goodness out. If you think about something which is hectare after hectare after hectare, when it is finished, of buildings which will be oriented so they have south-facing roof slopes, where they will capture electricity and solar. Not only is it very challenging to get enough electricity in to run our industry, but then the grid turns around and says, oh, well, it's very difficult to take it out again if you generate it. These imbalances have to be solved, and that requires strategic direction for our county, and I would argue going beyond our county, because there is a similar lack of strategic control in terms of inputs from the North Sea, where we had a briefing to Planning Committee only a few weeks ago, where we hear of scheme after scheme which is bringing renewable energy off the North Sea, which is fantastic. It's a great national resource. Each individual one carving its own line of connections to the grid, rather than having something put together which is a proper thought-through grid. And it is that lack of a proper thought-through facility. That is what we desperately need in this county, and indeed I would argue in the nation. And that is the message which I very much hope our consultants will engage with, because we don't just need to raise the questions here, we need answers and we need delivery by the suppliers. And I'm becoming increasingly frustrated that they ask eye-watering sums of money for connection, and that is an impairment to economic growth and to the prosperity of our people, and we are here to bust that if we possibly can. So, we've had a good debate on that one. I'm seeing no further questions from around the chamber. I'll move to the proposal, which is that I move that the committee has reviewed and is satisfied with the content of the interim report on the energy options analysis for Greater Lincolnshire, and that any relevant comments, all comments please, made will be passed on to RLB. Do we have any dissent from that? We do not. In that case, that is agreed, and thank you very much indeed for your contributions to that. We move to the final substantive item on the agenda, Waste Management Initiatives, which is item 7 on your agenda. This report can be found on pages 63 to 66 of the pack and summarises the activities and initiatives that have been undertaken to engage with the public to ensure Lincolnshire County Council continues to meet its statutory obligations as Waste Disposal Authority under the Environment Act 2021. And the actions before us this morning, the actions required by the committee are to review and comment on the contents of this report and seek assurance that action is taken that allows Lincolnshire County Council to adhere to its statutory obligations as Waste Disposal Authority and continue to improve the efficiency of the service. And this report will be presented by the even more patient than Mick King, Rachel Stapp, who's been sitting waiting patiently for us this morning, and she's of course the Waste Partnership and Projects Manager. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite rightly, as you've said, the paper before you is to provide an update as to the engagement activities that have been taking place so far in terms of meeting our obligations both as a waste disposal authority and working in partnership with the waste collection authorities. The Environment Act of 2021 is going to potentially see the changes in household waste collection disposal be the most prominent changes in the service in at least 20 years since home recycling was brought into being. We were anticipating that we would have some update from DEFRA over the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, that's been postponed, so we don't yet know when that will be coming to fruition. However, we have known that as a service, in terms of working with the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership, the role is to minimise waste in line with the waste hierarchy, and for us to meet the objectives that were set out in the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy, one of which being to increase the quality of the waste that we do collect, minimise our waste that goes forward, and also be looking at improvement projects to make sure that our services are effective and efficient. One of the initiatives which is in the next paper was to roll out twin stream collections, and what that showed us very much so was that engaging with the public in order to change behaviour was one of the most important factors to that success. So taking that and building on it, we've done a number of things now to change the perception of waste services in the county, one of which has been to establish a performance and improvement team whose primary concern is to engage with the public, to understand people's behaviours, why they do what they do, and ultimately get them to take some accountability and responsibility for their waste, i.e. minimise what they produce, and then to reduce, reuse and ultimately recycle, obviously before we send the majority through to our energy from waste facility. We have managed as that team over the last 2 years to have at least 3,000 and ever growing by the day direct reactive visits to householders across the 4 districts that have now rolled into the twin stream collections, and some most interesting conversations to understand behaviour going on with those residents. We continue to work proactively with the waste collection authorities on a day-by-day basis to support the collection rounds and to engage with members of the public again, to support them in doing the right things in their households. And certainly a learning point and understanding that sustaining that is not a one-hit wonder. We do need to keep revisiting these areas, especially where they're hard to reach, high prevalence of transients in the area, to support residents. We've also developed and have refined a schools engagement programme, which is entitled Let's Talk Rubbish. That's so far been delivered to in excess of 600 primary school children, and demand on that grows through the day. I think when the paper was written, it said a further 23 schools had signed up. I think you can now put that's a further 40 schools have now signed up, and that continues to grow by the day. Primary schools very much on board and taking that behaviour home, so we understand that investment in time and energy with our younger residents in Lincolnshire is key. Also, that is now expanding into community groups, so residents associations and the likes are calling on us on a day-by-day basis again to come and talk to them, for them to understand. So it's kind of some of the key activities of that team who are working really hard to engage and raise our profile. We're also working with other organisations, so one of our key partners at the moment has been to work with the University of Lincoln, so we are working with their students both on their geography course in terms of lecturing, but also supporting their students in work placements. And more importantly, we have now managed to get to a place where come the new academic year, we'll be working on campus and in the city and in the wider area to work with students to launch initiatives in terms of waste minimisation. Another part in terms of the engagement, which has been really important to us, has been to look at how our residents communicate with the local authority in terms of waste services. So as part of the customer digital strategy, we've done some significant improvements to the website. On the LCC website, it's been redesigned so that we now have at the forefront of that our most common questions, so it's based on data and evidence. We've introduced a new A to Z on there, which allows residents to ask the best way or the easiest way to dispose of their waste in either at curbside or at our household waste recycling centres, and we now continue to use that data and evidence to refine that in a view to switching the channel by which most people contact us in line with the direction of the Council's customer digital strategy. And in addition, we continue to build our communications campaign and strategy and giving some consistent branding across the county to fit in with the objectives again of the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy. So I'm sure you may well have seen the Right Thing, Right Bin campaign that continues to grow and ever develop across the county. So in conclusion, this is a report to bring to the committee the actions that have taken place. Potentially prior to the last 2 years, we hadn't worked consistently or as well consistently as we could have done with our partners. So this is to bring an update and to take any comments from the committee.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. I'm looking around the room, and Councillor Griggs will start us off. Councillor Griggs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A couple of points. Generally, I think it's a good report, although Councillor Dyer did forward a picture to both myself and the Chairman prior to leaving. So if we go to page 65, we talk about the website being redesigned and introducing regular Twitter and social media updates. Councillor Dyer sent me myself and the Chairman, a picture of Spalding Recycling Centre's tweet selling a week prior, saying that Sleaford Recycling Centre was not currently accepting any more general waste. Realistically, it's the wrong region, it's a week out of date. And whilst I don't want to just sit here and criticise, we can't sit here and say we're providing regular updates when actually we're not. So we need to make sure that that's exactly what we are doing and that we're extremely responsive to any changes in service and provision, because if we're not, people aren't going to go to Twitter or the website to check to see if we're accepting waste. And we all know, anecdotally or not, that it seems to be that if the recycling centres aren't accepting waste, we seem to get more fly tipping. And again, I appreciate that myself and Mike have had disagreements about the causality and how much those two things influence each other. But realistically, we want to be trying to mitigate the risk of fly tipping wherever possible. As a positive, I'm really, really pleased to see the level of education within this report. And again, the only other contention I have is, whilst it's really, really great that we're working with the University of Lincoln, obviously there are lots of other areas where potentially we could take the learning from Lincoln University and roll that out to other college centres or university centres throughout Lincolnshire. So other than that, I'm happy with the report.
Rachel, anything to come back on there?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yes, Councillor Griggs, I completely take your point on board about the Twitter feed. The Twitter feed, irrespective of which page you land on, so if you look at the Spalding Recycling Centre, be it Boston, be it Bourne, is the same Twitter feed across the top. We are working hard to maintain, and I will take that back to the working group around that. What we need to be doing, quite rightly, what we should be doing is saying, this week we're accepting everything, quite rightly. As I've sat here, I've got a couple of sites where because of the bank holiday, we're not accepting waste this morning. That should be going out as we speak, but I'll take that one back, thank you. And in terms of the university, this is really quite new to us in terms of engaging. So yes, again, we'll take that back. It would be great, wouldn't it, if we can take that to some of the other further education settings across the county once we've got a proof of concept with them.
Thank you very much for that. I think, like Councillor Griggs, I think an excellent report. And if Councillor Baxter will forgive me, I think the point you make about education, we could only really control behaviour if we had somebody standing next to the individual resident's bin, and we can't do that. But we can try and influence it. And I do appreciate that it's a bit like the Forth Bridge. You never finish that process. But getting people to understand the benefits of recycling, to understand the benefits, above all, of not producing waste in the first place, which is the first priority in the triangle of the waste hierarchy, actually does yield benefits. And I think when we look at the success, for example, of the paper and card stream, which in each district where it has gone out has now established itself producing very, very pure, very, very recyclable product of considerable value, which is also, making a return which is offsetting against the cost of waste collection and disposal. Those things are very, very important, and it's one of those things we just have to keep bashing away at, keep having to try and get better at, and keep communicating and communicating and communicating. So thank you very much indeed for your report. I'm not seeing any further questions from around the room. I will therefore move to the proposal, which is, I move that the committee has reviewed the contents of this report and has been assured that action is being taken that allows Lincolnshire County Council to adhere to its statutory obligations as waste disposal authority, and to continue to improve the efficiency of the service, and I'm sure that the comments made by members this morning will be captured and taken into account. Do we have any dissent to that? We do not. In that case, that is agreed. So, item 8 on the agenda is twin stream recycling update, which I've slightly anticipated in my last comments on the last item. That is on pages 67 to 70 of the agenda pack, and provides an update on the rollout of the separated paper and card collections across the county, which now covers 4 of the 7 districts. The action before us this morning, or indeed now, yes, still this morning, is this. The actions required by the committee are to review and comment on the contents of this report and seek assurance that action is taken that allows Lincolnshire County Council to meet objectives defined within the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy and help contribute towards the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership objectives of, and I quote, seeking the best environmental option to provide innovative, customer-friendly waste management solutions that give value for money to Lincolnshire. This report will also be presented by Rachel Stamp, Waste Partnership and Projects Manager, who is in the chamber. So again, over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Chairman. So just in terms of a little context around the twin stream recycling, the trial for this was way back now in 2019. It seems such a long time ago, where we took the concept to not only separate the paper and card into a separate waste stream, but also to improve the quality of the remaining mixed dry recyclate. The trial proved successful, and so implementation of a rollout began in 2021. As you'll see in the paper, there are now 4 of the waste collection authorities that have rolled this into business as usual. So Boston Borough Council, North Kesteven District, West Lindsey District Council, and now East Lindsey District Council. So since the inception of collections of separate paper and through to February, nearly 14,000 tonnes of high quality paper and card had been collected from those residents. That paper and card never touches the rest of the mixed dry recycling now and goes directly off to a paper reprocessing facility in Kings Lynn. We pride ourselves on the fact that we remain there, the local authority that provide them with the highest quality material, with under 1.5% contamination in that whole waste stream going through to the processors. It allows them to recycle that material up to 7 times. As a site where it was commingled with the rest of the recycling, it may have been recycled once or twice at a lower quality. So one of the key objectives there is that we are using a lot less natural resources by separating that material. In addition to that, and I think equally as important, we call it the twin stream, and it's very easy for people who have called it the paper and card trial. One of our major factors here was to improve the quality of the rest of the mixed dry recycling. Prior to commencement of the trial, over 32% of the recycling that we collected at curbside was contaminated, i.e. non-target materials. Since the engagement, as I referred to in the last paper, and the communication and the buy-in, the very successful buy-in of residents, the 3 fractions that remain in the recycling now in the areas where we have rolled in, so the metals, the glass and the plastics that we accept, contamination in there has gone down to an average of just around 15% in the authorities that have rolled in, and continues to reduce. So we're currently looking at the data to see what that 15% is made up and how we continue to improve that. So that's a marked improvement, and obviously means that we're able to recycle a lot more in terms of volume of those materials that we are sending through to the material recycling facility. Again, this is backed by the education from the performance and improvement team, working with residents. We do find a lot of residents now, it's learned by doing and a lot of osmosis, so really good to see when we go out and we understand. I actually went out on the ground with the teams last week to actually look in areas and understand where it is sustained and the improvements that have been made and continue to be made by the community. So in terms of where we go now, we are going to hold steady with the 4 authorities that have rolled in at this time, make sure they're sustained, and the plan is then we're working with the 3 remaining waste collection authorities to discuss how we move forward in terms of rolling this initiative out with them in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. And I would now like to invite members of the committee to ask clarifying questions. And Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. This is great news. Thank you for the report, and the figures are really encouraging. You know that in previous meetings I've complained about the 31% contamination, and this seems to be part of the solution. I'm interested in what the next bit of the solution might be. I suspect it might be separating out the food waste, and do we have a plan? Do we have a media plan when our residents are faced with a green bin, a black bin, a silver bin, a paper bin, a food waste bin and all that? Are we ready for those jokes that are likely to come forward? Unjustified, but some of them quite funny. The second question is about the rollout. Given the enormous success of this scheme, is it possible that we can roll this out to the other authorities any quicker? Thirdly, the paper prices. I'm tempted to ask how a factory can recycle a product 7 times. I don't understand that, but perhaps it's something we should do offline. But unless it's easy. But if the rest of the country, due to the Environment Act, is suddenly going to start separating out paper and card, are we going to continue to be a preferred customer of the Kings Lynn plant, or is the price going to fall through the floor, as I remember it doing when I was a recycling officer in the 1990s, that suddenly it became trendy and then suddenly it became untrendy because there was no market for it, especially now that print media has gone out of fashion. And finally, I recognise what you said about waiting for some more information, but do we have any idea about new burdens funding for districts or disposal authorities for the implications of the forthcoming Environment Act? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for those questions. Would you like to unpick those, Rachel? Because obviously we have a crystal ball and we know the Environment Act is going to have such an impact, and we are still waiting, as I understand it, for the details which will have such an influence on what we're discussing. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I take your 4 points here, Councillor Baxter. So in terms of the food waste, again, so this we are currently waiting for the Environment Act to mandate through consistent collections. We are pretty confident that's going to happen. In terms of a campaign for communication, so there will be a national campaign because there'll be a national edict, but we are already working very hard on preparing our own media. Based on what we've heard on the streets already, the engagement we have, people ask us often, why can't we, or when will we? So yes, we have a strategy in hand in terms of not only for the communications around food waste, but also obviously for the disposal, and our partners in the waste collection authorities working really hard in terms of what they need to understand for collection of separate food waste collections. In terms of the speed of rollout, in an ideal world, I'd love to say yes, let's move everybody forward now. We have a number of things there. We have to work in partnership with our waste collection authority partners, so we require both being able to go at the same time. One of the success criteria has been around being able to take it on a step-by-step basis and allow people the time that they have needed to adjust to the behaviour change that we've asked them to. Indeed, if we rolled in the remaining 3 authorities together, we would look at an increased cost in terms of the support we'd be able to give them. So we need to be able to plan that and have buy-in from our partners. With regard to the paper prices, I'd love to say that the market will hold buoyant. It's based on supply and demand, as you quite rightly say. I think what's very evident is the engagement we've done and the quality element that we have promoted has meant that we do collect extremely high quality material, and I know that we will continue to do that. The paper prices, we track them obviously based on national indices. If you look at the Let's Recycle prices, you'll have seen last year there was a massive peak through to November, a massive drop. It is a market-driven price that we are working with. In terms of where they're able to get their raw materials from, again, the processors we're working from really would rather have their materials come from the UK. So as it stands at the moment, we've been through a competitive process and we're in contract in terms of based on an indices-based price for that. again, new burdens. Our indication tells us that we are expecting imminently, I think is the word, but imminent's been 2 years now, imminently. The latest indication is that we would hope probably sometime by early summer to hear. Indicatively, we understand that the new burdens funding is still being finalised in terms of who will get what, but the new burdens funding for food waste collections is primarily going to go towards collection authorities at this point and not the disposal. We are still in the hands of waiting for those details to be sent to us. I'd love to give you a definite date, we all would, but I think imminent's been for the last 2 years now, so I can't be any more precise.
Thank you very much for that. Can I just pick up on one point, going back to getting the other district councils who are not yet doing paper and card to do paper and card. Timeline for that anticipated? Can you give us a guess?
Anticipated that we will potentially by the end of 2024, sort of early 2025, hopefully be able to do that. Again, there are all sorts of local issues that those WCAs have got themselves to manage in terms of their own priorities and workload. In an ideal world, we would have everybody rolled in by 2025, but I can't guarantee that. That's
excellent. Can I add a couple of slightly more technical questions? First one relates to the performance data. Has the tonnage collected in each district remained relatively steady over the months since rollout started? Or has there been any drop in the amount presented in any district?
Indicative figures are showing us, and we're actually doing some work on this now to look into a little bit more detail. Indicatively, it appears that where residents now have a separate collection of paper and card, have thought about their behaviour, that the overall tonnage from those households has slightly decreased. Now, there may be maybe other causes for that as well. It may have been in line with the COVID pandemic. It may be in line with the cost of living. So we're trying to do some analysis around that at the moment, and we can bring that back to a future meeting when we have some data.
And it is, of course, worth remembering that a reduction in tonnage is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a good thing. If we remember our waste hierarchy pyramid, the first and most important thing is to reduce the overall amount of waste. But a second question, which, and again, interest declared, does I think, reflect brilliantly on North Kesteven, but I'm here as a county councillor today. In relation to the performance data, the tonnage collected obviously varies by different districts. When you look at those figures broken down, it varies on a monthly basis. It varies from around 350 for North Kesteven to about 170 for Boston. Is this variation down to population size, or is it down to how well the twin stream programme is performing in each district, or is it a mixture of the two?
Mr Chairman, it's, I think, definitely a mixture of the two. So we are seeing, as you say, a higher kilograms per household yield in some districts to others based on the number of households that we're collecting from. Some of that is to do with the rurality, the demographics. Certainly what we do tend to see is where we have more rural districts, more rural areas in districts, the behaviours of people are they're more likely to have things delivered by post, etc. Where people live in a more urban settlement, it's perhaps the ways by which people shop is slightly different because they have accessibility. So again, that's something in terms of behaviour change and behavioural science that we're looking at the moment, because it's very, very interesting to understand that. And I think the other thing that leads us on to is the engagement, and really important to say, when we engage, one size does not fit all. Difference between rural and urban demographics and the way people's waste behaviours, their purchasing behaviours is very different, and something that we are looking at for future rollouts.
Thank you very much indeed for those answers. And Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. On a practical question, I think it's really good, you know, what's happening, but in terms of space that households have, they're not going to have necessarily all households room for all these different types of collection. I mean, you can't really do anything about that. So how are you going to prioritise what type of recycling is more important?
Thank you. We have certainly come across people who've said they don't have room for an additional bin. In order to understand their priorities, our teams go and talk to people. We do an analysis of their space and what they have, and work with residents around the best solution for them. In the most case, I can be completely honest, the majority of people have room, but they don't necessarily want to make room until you have that conversation, being very honest. Whereby people do need to prioritise, we work with the waste collection authorities to understand what is the best solution for them. So there have been a number of solutions whereby potentially some residents have shared with a neighbour. If they're low number households, they've shared with a neighbour. Others have said, actually, I can't manage with recycle. I don't recycle anyway, so we do a needs analysis and we provide them with the best solution for them. What we don't say is it's black or white, and actually people are human, so we'll talk to them. And this has been the benefit of the engagement programme that we continue to run.
Thank you very much for that. Before we move on from this topic, we do have on Teams Nicole Hilton who would like to come in. Nicole, are you there?
I am. Thank you very much. I just wanted to follow up on a whole host of comments and queries there, if I may. So one is with regards to the paper and card. So whilst I know that there's almost an impulsion to get this done in a much more speedy way, I think it's really important to remember that it's done in partnership. So it's the collection authority as well as the disposal authority working together, and it just takes some time for the district collection authorities to get through a whole host of different processes. So it requires, for example, an additional collection. So they need to think about all of their routing, all of their staffing, all of their rotas, have the vehicles available, etc., for us to get hold of the engagement and make sure that our residents know what's coming. So it has all been done under a very, very clear project plan. And I have to say, having been the one that kind of brought this in and pushing for it to be done as quickly as possible, this in reality was as quickly as it could be done, because the risks of getting this wrong and therefore then impacting on our residents' goodwill and engagement with the process to do the right thing could have been undermined. So our patience has paid off in the right way. That will then reflect on how we go about the new responsibilities of separated food waste. So what we done and what we learned from the way in which we did the paper and card will absolutely roll into that project plan. There is a project board. We will be hoping to be able to come and talk to Scrutiny in more detail as that builds, and we have a more detailed plan that is then based upon what DEFRA actually tell us about things like new burdens, etc. I think it's important for us to recognise that DEFRA have 3 huge projects going at the moment that are all to do with our waste management, all of which require national infrastructure to be in place in readiness for us to receive it. So we have the deposit return scheme, we have the supplier taxation under the ERP scheme, and we also then have the whole rollout of AD plants that are going to need to deal with our food waste. So all of that needs to be there in place to come online, so that we have a very clear process available for what is us coming along pretty much at the tail end of that. Obviously, we are using our ability to influence, to persuade, and to challenge some of that. But a lot of these things are in train, and it will be a fairly kind of long process, to be fair, to do that. In regards to the need for ever more bins and ever more containers for bins, I think what we also need to recognise is what sits behind this, again, is that hierarchy of waste. What we're trying to do is make people much more mindful about how much they throw away and reduce how much they throw away. So in an ideal scenario, what we should do is reduce the number, the size and volume and cubic capacity of our bins for a much smaller amount. And rather than have, the replacing wheelie bins to the same size, if this works, and all indications are from the paper and card trial and the impact on contamination, what it should do is reduce the actual size of the bin capacity, so that households and residents, yes, they'll have more options in which to put their waste that they throw away, but it will hopefully make it more mindful, so the amount of waste that they are throwing away is much reduced, and that what we do throw away, we are deriving value from. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for those comments, Nicole. The only thing I would say is please don't reduce the size of the paper and card bin, because I fill mine we get collected, I think, every 3 weeks. It's always full by the time it's collected. Right, I don't see any further calls from the House, except Councillor Griggs. I beg your pardon, Councillor Griggs.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'd just like to come back on a point Nicole raised. I mean, I completely see her point. But I still feel that most residents, myself included, are at the mercy of the producers who produce things. Yeah, if all of a sudden you started shrinking my bin, case in point, yesterday was quite windy, and my blue bin was collected this morning. And yesterday afternoon, I was chasing bits of rubbish around the road because I went to empty my bin out and half of it blew down the street. And yeah, I'm maybe not as nimble as I was when I was first elected, but I'm still capable of climbing in my wheelie bin, jumping it down and managing to fit stuff in a bin. And we're relatively cognizant of what we buy. We don't waste much in terms of, there's very little food waste except things like potato peelings and stuff. We don't buy things for the sake of having it, yet we still produce a lot of waste based on the amount of packaging that comes with products. And whilst I can completely see Nicole's point, once producers get on side, yeah, most definitely start thinking about shrinking bins. But until we get to that point where people are able to make a decision and go, well, there is a choice and not have much waste produced, we're kind of at the mercy of people who supply us products. And so I think, at least to my mind, for a very long period of time, I can't see a situation in which reducing bins would be a good idea without lots of public outcry.
I'm sure those comments will be, as we say, captured. Nicole, you're back with us, I think, on the internet.
I am, yeah. Just to reassure, this is the cultural behavioural change that are required in residents is a long-term 10, 20 years. So please don't panic that we would be reducing the size of the bins in the foreseeable future. Couldn't agree with the comments any more strongly, that until we get suppliers on board and taking responsibility for the amount of packaging that they put around the consumer items, and also what that packaging is made of and whether we are able to recycle it, you're absolutely right. We'll only ever do 1/3 of what is possible, and that is residents doing the right thing. Without suppliers and manufacturers doing the right thing, we will never get it right.
Thank you very much for that, and I do think that the debate we've had this morning and the comments we've heard and the expert counsel from our officers just underlines that although it seems a really simple thing to do, you chuck something in the bin, actually you're starting a process which is really, really complicated. And I think in particular what comes out to me this morning is the work that this council and our partners at the Waste Collection Authorities are doing in terms of educating the public, including small children, capture them while you're young and you've got them, is incredibly important, that we do understand it's not just a matter of out of sight, out of mind when you chuck it in the bin. We, all of us, have a responsibility in this area, and it is a very, very complicated subject. I'm going to move us to the proposal, colleagues, which is that I move that the committee has reviewed the contents of this report and has been assured that action is being taken that allows Lincolnshire County Council to meet objectives defined within the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy and help contribute toward the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership objectives of, and I quote, seeking the best environmental option to provide innovative, customer-friendly waste management solutions that give value for money to Lincolnshire. And of course, the comments of the committee will be captured this morning. Do we have any dissenters from that? We do not. In that case, that is agreed, and I thank everyone for their contribution. And I move us to the final item on the agenda, which is item 13, the committee work programme, which you can find on pages 71 to 76 of the pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the content of our work programme, and the action before us is the actions required by the committee are to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. The report will be presented by Tracy Johnson, Senior Scrutiny Officer, and over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. Since the agenda has been published, there have been 2 additions to the work programme, both for the 12th September meeting. The first report is on waste transfer station improvements, and the second is on food waste disposal contract procurement. Both reports are coming for pre-decision scrutiny prior to decision by Councillor McNally between the 18th and 22nd of September. Committee's next meeting is on the 30th of May, where you will receive the outcomes and recommendations from the reviews undertaken by the scrutiny panels A and B on town centre improvements and agricultural sector support. As the Chairman reported earlier, the committee is also due to receive the outcomes and recommendations from the motorhomes and campervans working group. With regards to Councillor Bowles' comment earlier about RAF Scampton, just to make members aware that report in relation to RAF Scampton is due to be considered by the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee at its meeting on the 9th of May. So it may be of interest to the report there. And otherwise, I welcome any suggestions from members for future agenda items. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have anybody who wishes to comment or ask a question? We have Chris Miller.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to note that the proposed report, the carbon report 2022-2023, will now take place much later in the year. It won't appear on the 30th of May. That's so we're able to reflect newer figures that will be provided over the summer period. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that addition. Any further comments? In that case, I will move to the action, which is the actions required by the committee are to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. I beg your pardon, I have read precisely the wrong thing on my page. I, in fact, don't do that at all. What I do is move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed on pages 71 to 76 with the additional items provided by Tracy and Chris. We'll get this right if we keep doing it long enough. Any dissenters from that? I'm seeing none, therefore that is agreed. And that brings us to the end of the meeting, a very productive one this morning. I thank everyone who's been attending in the chamber. I thank those who have been participating with us on the internet, and indeed those who have been watching on the live stream. So thank you very much indeed for your attendance, and this meeting at 5 minutes past 12 is now closed. Thank you.